I'm going to talk a bit about a different aspect that we also considered in the project, the health economic impact, because in the end I think it's important that products like these have a beneficial impact, of course, on the health outcomes, but also do it in a sustainable way, so also looking at the cost side. And I will not go too much detail about the results, but more about what I think is important to know about health economics in these kind of projects and some lessons that we learned during the AI Mind project. So the three things I want to mention to you today, and what I think is important, that you should start early with these kinds of health economic analysis. I will of course explain a bit more why and how, to make it dynamic, and also to look beyond costs and health outcomes only, and also about other outcomes that I will show. Oh, the other way around. So first of all, a very quick introduction. What is health economics? Now, in basic principle, it's quite simple. We look at a specific population, we look at the current practice, and then to a new strategy, and how would that influence costs and effects. Yeah. And if we talk about effects, we in health economics mostly would like to translate it to an effect to which really says something about patients. So often what we do is to look into so-called QALYs, a combination between life years and quality of life. And in the end, what we want to do is to look at, okay, how would a new product fall into this picture? So what we want to do is to look at how would it influence costs and health outcomes. And of course, and if you can show that a new product would reduce costs but improve health outcomes, I think that would be the most beneficial part. But it could also, for instance, be that a product increases the cost a bit and we still deem it cost effective as long as we show that we gain enough health with this new product. So this is at the end the basics of what we do in health economics. And I think, the traditional way of doing health economics, and I think in first instance also the most logical timing, is to do it at the end when a product is developed. You have the information about the product, what it can do on its effectiveness outcomes, and then look at, okay, how would that translate into health outcomes and costs. But actually you can also already do it at the early stages of development. So that's also what we did in the AI Mind project. We start really early by looking at the potential impact on cost and health outcomes, something that's what we called early health technology assessment, early HTA. So we really started to look at the early stages of development, early in the project. How could AI Mind influence health outcomes and costs, and in what way could we optimize that later on? So I will not go into much detail here, but how we do it is by using simulation models. So we simulate a current practice, how would patients flow to current practice, and how would that change when we include a new strategy like AI Mind. And actually using existing data from current practices, you can feel already a lot about this simulation model. So we can include already a lot of parameters here. So for instance, what we can know is how many patients would convert in current practice when we do not intervene early, how many would not convert, but also in the, so that's what we know. Let's see. And then we look into, okay, what would we change if we use a product like AI Mind? So in this case, we going to see if we can have individual prognostic information, which of the patients are likely to convert, and which of the patients are more likely not to be a converter from MCI to dementia later on. And then if we know which ones are the converters, we can also attach consequences to that. So if someone converts quite early, they will flow to stages of dementia, and we can add consequences to that. So consequences with regard to cost, but also quality of life, of course. And then what we can do, if we know all that, we of course at this point do not know about what's the accuracy of a product like AI Mind is at that moment. We don't have the results from the clinical studies yet, But what we can already do with such a models is to say, okay, but what if we are able to predict the converters in a certain way, with a certain accuracy? How would that influence, in the end, the health outcomes and costs? And why do we want to know that at an early stage? At least why I believe that we want to know that. First of all, it gives you insight in the potential value. Is it worthwhile to really put a lot of effort in developing this product? But I think even more important is to guide the specifications of the product. So is it really important to be really sensitive with your product, or do you want to put more emphasis on the specificity? That's of course also a weighing between the two. It can really help in guiding the positioning of such a test. So how do you combine it with other existing modalities, diagnostic tests? And what is also very nice, that it's already in an early stage, gives you a lot of information. What parameters in this model were still empty? So what information do we lack to, in the end, be able to show the cost effectiveness? And then you can already take that into your account in your clinical studies and gather that data on time and not waste time by, in the end, have to obtain that data. So that was the start early point. I hope that was already that you keep in mind. But also what's really important in health economics is that I believe that the outcome of a diagnostic product or a predictive product really depends on the context in which you use it. So which country, which specific hospital, and that's because like Christopher also already mentioned, the population is really different between hospitals or countries, but also the way how they treat patients currently, how they do their diagnostic tests. So this is just a fictive situation, but what can really be the case is that the same product can be very cost effective in one context, but when you calculate it, assess it in another context, that the outcomes really change. So that's why we believe that you should make this kind of analysis really dynamic, and that's also what we did in the AI Mind project. So we made a dynamic model with a corresponding dashboard in which you can really adjust your analysis toward a specific context. So how do they do their diagnosis now? What's the current treatment? What's the specific population? And in this way you can adapt it to the context, but also update it over time when new data is coming available or when practice is changing. So I really believe that this is not, health economics is not a one-time thing you should do, like it's used now quite often I think, but it's something that you should start early and can help you along the way, and even after implementation it can help you when things are updated to also update your health economic evaluations. And then as a last point, we now focus quite heavily on cost and effects, but what you see is getting more important in these kind of analysis is workforce impact. So I think we've seen that costs were in the years before, I think a lot mentioned quite often that it's really important to reduce costs because we are spending too much money in healthcare. But I think maybe even more important now is the workforce impact, because we see a lot that we just can't handle it anymore with the people that we have in healthcare. So I think it's also really important to take workforce impact into account, also from an early stage. What is your potential impact with your product on the workforce that is needed in a specific area? And besides that, I think also what's getting more emphasis is environmental impact. So what's the environmental impact of the technology itself? That's also something that we are working on, is looking, okay, how does all these AI models, the training, the data storage impacts the environment? But then of course we also should take into account at the other end, if we reduce progression towards dementia stages, that of course also can have quite a big environmental impact. So that's really challenging, but I think it's possible to at least make a very good first idea about what's the environmental impact is going to be. And then that brings me back to the 3 points. from the beginning. So I think if you are doing such a project, a new AI product for instance, start early with your health economics. It can help you along the way. Make your health economics dynamic so that you can make it context specific, and also you can change it when things change in the current practice or things change in your product itself. And think about looking beyond costs and health outcomes only, and also look at definitely workforce impact and environmental impact potentially as well. And with that, I will hand the floor to Guido, who is going to tell you about clinical.